Hello and good afternoon. Welcome to Production Pulse, Industry Week's bi-weekly live video show where we talk to newsmakers. And today we have two guests. We have recently launched a talent advisory board at Industry Week, trying to collect some of the best advice people have gotten over the years that really influence their careers and offer that advice to younger people just starting out in manufacturing to see how you can get the career you want as you develop your experience and really grow into the field. We have Audrey Van de Castle from Stanley Black & Decker, and Audrey is a member of the board, and she's also participated in features with us in the past. Thank you for joining us today. And we have Despina Anastasio from Dow, who is calling in from Switzerland. So we have a nice international panel today. Also a member of our board, and some of you have a PhD in chemistry, but have worked more in the talent management side for the past several years, it sounds like.
Always volunteering to help there. Thank you for having us.
So the whole purpose of our talent advisory board is to really encourage people to open up this dialogue about how to get the career you want. And when it came to some of the advice that people offered in our first question, the first question was, what's the best piece of advice you received within your first 5 years in industry? And Audrey, I'm going to start with you. I'm going to put up on the screen just a snippet of what you said, but this really spoke to a lot of us, this idea that you needed to declare yourself. Yeah, tell people where you want to go, what you want your career to be, because a lot of us kind of assume there's a meritocracy out there that no matter what, people are going to notice when we do good work. And in an ideal world, maybe, but there's sometimes the need to really go out and let people know where you want to go. Can you talk a little bit about when you got that advice and how you applied that?
Yeah, definitely. So there's an executive here at Stanley Black & Decker who she's iconic. She's awesome. She has a lot of people that reach out to her, men and women, looking for advice. And so she started this series called Courageous Conversation so that she could give lots of people advice all at once, right? And she did this whole session on the concept of declare yourself. And that's really where I kind of got the light bulb turned on in my mind around this concept. And, in my career, I've experienced reorgs or shuffles, right, where someone that doesn't know me or maybe doesn't know me very well or my hopes and dreams very well decides what my next role is going to be, right? And so that can leave a pretty bad feeling in your stomach, right? And so when I heard her say, you can't assume that your manager or your HR person knows what you want to do with your career unless you tell them, right? That was just, it's such simple advice, but I was like, well, duh, right? So you really have to actually declare yourself and tell the people around you, tell your leadership, tell the people that support you do and where you want to go, because those people are your advocates and they can help you get there. And when things like that happens, org shakeups happen, right? They can help you land in a spot that's where you want to go with your career. And that sometimes you maybe didn't think of yourself going into, but that external perspective, knowing where you want to go, they can say, I can see how this role can fit into their next step in their career and really open that door for you. So I think that's a principle that I've passed that on to people and I carry it on today, right? I'm always, if I get a new manager or a new HR partner, one of the first conversations I have with them is, hey, this is what I want to do when I grow up. This is where I want my career to go, right? Just so that that's out there on the table with them and they're aware of that. So I think definitely some really valuable advice that I got that I think about all the time still.
I'm drawing a blank on the name of the book, but there was one of these management books I read that made the distinction between the rock star and the superstar. And the rock star is someone who's focused. That's the person, they know their job, they're going to do it, they're going to do it really well. They probably become a subject matter expert, but they're going to focus on one thing their entire career, and they're going to do it fantastically, and they're really valuable to an organization. Then there are the superstars, the ones who want to do just a little bit of everything. It's the person who, in Hollywood terms, the actor, musician, drawing blanks on names right now, but those people who can just do a little bit of everything and really kind of drive that. And that's a different role. And you have to let people know which lane you want to be in, because if you want to be that rock star, if you want to focus on one thing and people keep trying to put you into roles where you're not going to be comfortable, you're not going to be happy and you're probably not going to get the best work out of you.
Right. And we need both types. We need rock stars and we need superstars, right? We need people that can do a lot of things. We need person that can get really deep knowledge in one thing. So there's room for both types for sure.
Jasmine, before we go over to your comments, I just wanted to get your take on what Audrey was saying. This idea of declaring yourself and letting everyone know that what your role, what your ideal role is within an organization. How important you would see that being.
Yeah, it's extremely important, but it's very timing specific. And sometimes when we start early in our career, we might not know what we want. So when I look back, and I really was trying to draw on your question on that early 5 years, and I was thinking of what my career orientation was. And in those days, we talked mainly about 4. There's a few extras now, but it was either around adventure, advancement, security, or autonomy. The entrepreneur is more likely to want autonomy. Maybe me now in a more mature stage of my career, I might be looking more for security. But in those early years, I was looking for adventure. I loved the whole idea of travel, and I also wanted to advance. I knew what I didn't want. So I knew I didn't want to stay in the laboratory forever. I knew that even though I had a doctorate in chemistry, I could be around good science and material science and technology, but not necessarily do it in the lab. So I knew what I didn't want. And that's the challenge, that you want to be a little bit careful, because yes, you can declare yourself, but if you declare yourself too early, or you're looking like you're shooting for advancement opportunities, yet you haven't got that good performance baseline, you could set yourself up for a little bit of disappointment. And nobody is going to advocate or sponsor or support you if you haven't got a proven track record. So I'm a firm believer those first 2 to 3 years, you need to get into an organization or where you're working, build a good brand for yourself, understand how the organization works, observe, learn from others, get involved in projects, try to understand what is available that could be a fit for yourself, and for sure declare yourself. If you declare yourself inappropriately, it can work against you. That happened to me actually, where because I'd knocked back a couple of opportunities, which the leaders then felt were amazing advancement opportunities, why didn't she take them? They essentially felt that I wasn't really serious about mobility opportunities. And, you know, to cut a long story short, it took a chance encounter with another leader for me to clarify that, because my own boss knew I was mobile for the next job. Times had changed, family had finished, I was at a different stage in my life. My own boss knew what I wanted, but he did not have the sphere of influence to be communicating that on my behalf. So I fully agree with what Audrey says. I just think in my case, build that solid performance baseline in that first 2 to 3 years, better understand what it is that you want, and be strategic in what you're declaring and to whom.
Your comment, I really enjoyed. You talked about that getting involved within the larger organization, and not being too selective, because you never know what you're going to learn from any given opportunity. You know, sorry about the smaller text. We were really thinking about people with under 50-year-old eyes like myself. But this idea that it might sound like a mundane project, but you're going to learn that transferable skill, and then more importantly, the ability to share that message, that ability to really communicate with people. That's something that comes up with project work, with getting involved in those organizations. Can you talk a little more about that, just about how important that was to your career?
I mean, when I was early in my career, I had this hunger of what more can I do? How else can I show my value? And so I'd be putting my hand up, but then when someone gave me something, I'd be going, really? Oh, that doesn't involve travel, or, I wasn't looking for more workload. I was looking for, remember, the adventure and the advancement. And that's where that advice came, where I had to shift my thinking. It did come from advice of a leader, where it happened to be my second leader in the company. And she said to me, she said, look, you can look at it and cringe, or you can look at it and say, why now? And what are you going to, and I internalized that. And it became part of my question when people would approach me for roles, where I would ask, why me, why now? What do you think I can bring to this? I internally assessed myself what I could get out of it. in terms of those transferable skills. But the value that I realized, and I didn't know this early, is that you are building up relationship capital. As people get to know you, you know, we talk about networking and we make it sound like it's an intentional activity, but the more organic it happens in the way that you work beside people, they see how you solve problems, they see what you stand for and what you believe, that makes for a much stronger network in an organization. And it also means that you are learning from others, you are contributing, and so you are beyond that performance. You are now building towards that level where you can probably attract a sponsor who will be someone that will become your best and strongest advocate for declaring yourself. And they'll actually, if they're a true sponsor, they'll declare on your behalf in those closed meetings.
It's fascinating to hear you talk about these things. Early in my career, I was invited to sit on the safety committee at a newspaper, and I was the representative from the newsroom, and we'd go to these meetings, and the people from the delivery trucks talking about, oh, you know, someone had a severe injury when a pallet of material fell on their hand and was rushed to the hospital. And they would get to the next person in the press room, and we had a near miss with the printing press, and when no one was injured, but it could have been really bad. And they would get to my presentation, and paper cuts. The newsroom was a very safe place, relatively speaking, but it did give me a real appreciation of how the entire product was put together. It's very manufacturing is not alone in this siloing where people focus only on their internal job and don't really understand how the large organization works. Even though it was not, I didn't become a safety expert and never pursued that as a career, it was very valuable to understanding the organization and did lead to relationships I was able to lean on later. So, Audrey, when you heard Despina speaking about the kind of the risks of declaring yourself, the risks of maybe going too early and saying the wrong, is that a concern you had when you said, did you know exactly where you wanted to be enough that you could share that with people?
Yeah. I think one of the important aspects when we have these kind of declare yourself conversations with our networks is not being afraid to change what you want to do, right? And I think I loved what you said, Despina, about figuring out what you don't want to do. I think that's so important, especially early career. In college, I always give this advice to college kids. Hey, take some courses that are outside of what you think you might expect. And even if you don't like it, great. You've now figured out something that you don't want to do, and your list is a lot shorter, or it can be one item shorter at least, right? So I think that that's super valuable advice, especially early in career. Try a bunch of different stuff, figure out what you don't like, because that's going to help you narrow down what you actually want to do. When I came out of college thinking I was going to do and what I do today, I never would have imagined what I do today. But through my network, through figuring out what I didn't want to do and what I liked to do and what I was good at doing, I've kind of landed where I am today and love my job, and I'm super passionate about it, right? So I think that that's absolutely valuable advice.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. It's the same thing. My daughter is 19 years old. She's a sophomore in college and loving that. But when she was choosing her major, when she was choosing her school, there was this real fear of, oh, will I be able to do whatever job once I graduate? And the advice I gave her was, how many people who I went to school with got degrees in web design? I graduated in the late 90s. And it was absolutely zero. It was not a field that existed. But how many people do I know who are professional web designers? It's quite a large number. They were people who studied graphic design, or in one case, someone who studied physics and just fell into it because he loved the technology. Your opportunities are not necessarily going to be driven entirely by your education and your experience. It's going to be something that happens, and just being open to that. Outside of, I would imagine, in Despina's case, if you have a PhD in chemistry, that puts you on a little more of a track towards something than. But again, that's not where your career took you.
Yeah, it didn't actually, and even though you made the comment, just for the purposes of disclosure here, just in case my employer is watching, I'm actually not heavily involved in talent officially. My job is in strategy and business models and growth, but talent is where I gravitate to, because when I had a little bit of what I would have called a changing career, I'd been in China, I went back to Australia, a much smaller role. I then started to explore, well, what do I really want to do next? Where am I focusing towards? And for me, what really resonated with me was that Ikigai model, which is around finding your why or your passion, which is, what do I get paid for? What am I good at, right? What does the world need? And what's the last one? It's what do I love, right? And when you can get those to intersect with your job, and in my case, I was still doing project work, I was still doing business models and growth, but I found myself very attracted with helping people that didn't report to me to be able to be successful at what they were doing. And that's how I got more involved in the talent piece, because I still believe that for the company to be successful, every individual has the opportunity to consider themselves a work in progress. And the more we help them navigate their path to what their success equation is, the better off, Stanley, Decker, and my company, Dow, and everybody will be. And that for me is really important. And I think all of us, and in our case, in many companies, and I think many of our listeners would attest to that, there's lots of things going on beyond the widget or the product that you sell. There's sustainability, there's decarbonizing, there's ESG, there's inclusion, there's looking at making the world a fairer and better place. And all of those activities can also be projects in a way that drive not only what the company strategy is, but also drive us as an individual. Yeah. Regardless of what degree brought us into that company, or any degree, because we also support apprenticeships, and we also support a lot of people from non-degree type backgrounds to be able to have a meaningful career with us as well.
Yeah, Despina, I think that I love that perspective, and I have that same perspective often. I think one person can do some things to change the world depending on who that person is, but when we have the platform of a Fortune 500 company, we can do a lot more to change the world than just an individual, right? So I think that's, kind of a hidden part of a job, but something that brings a lot of satisfaction and value in my personal life with my job, right? I'm super passionate about getting women involved in trades and manufacturing, and I work for a company that lets me do that, right? Exactly. Not my job, but it's something that I do, right?
But it makes a big difference to your success in your job, and it also means that you're learning, again, back to these transferable skills.
Yeah.
You're also, because obviously if these line up with what the company values are, they line up with your values. It's accretive. You belong. You see yourself as belonging there. But also too, what that means is that employee engagement is up, employee satisfaction is up, the whole employee experience is better, we're better for our stakeholders, and you're learning. We're all works in progress. And one of the biggest lessons that I think, we waited for a certain position and a certain time frame to say, when I'm a leader, I will. But no, shift that thinking and say, I lead from where I stand. Yeah. And independent of whether you've been in the company for a day, a month, or a year, you can redefine leadership as an opportunity to influence others and at the same time have an impact. So I sound a little bit preachy in my philosophy there, but I really believe that that's a big enabler for people early in their career, and that's how you're building a brand, and that's how you're building. You're making a baseline of your performance, but you're also building up your relationship with others. You're observing, Robert, like what you said, that you watch others. You might not have been able to contribute a lot with paper cuts, even though I think they hurt and they're important to not negate. But at the end of the day, you are also watching and learning as you observed others.
Well, you mentioned, Audrey, women in manufacturing. I think of the moment we're in now with some of the Fortune 500 companies. I think of specifically Cummins and General Motors. Not only it's people who rose up to the CEO ranks through the engineering side. And if you look at, say, Mary Barra's career at GM, there's no way you could chart that and say when she was a plant manager in her late 20s that she was going to be the CEO of the company, because she went through plant management to some departmental work to human resources, labor negotiations. It was not a career path you could chart, but it was definitely a career path that she was intentional about because it took her to where she is. And I think there's a lot to learn from, being flexible enough to see those opportunities, but also, really making sure you're watching out for where you're going and putting some direction behind that.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much. It's been a fascinating conversation. Really appreciate you. Thank you both for being part of our Talent Advisory Board. We will be asking a new question every month. We're still working on April's question. We'll be going out to you two and the rest of the board in the next week or so. Thank you so much. We appreciate your time today. I think we might have one question, or is it a comment? It was just from my colleague Jill Jusko saying that you have both energized her to think bigger. So thank you. So I have great to hear from her. Thank you so much. Appreciate your time and have a wonderful week. And thank you everyone out there for listening or paying attention today.
Thank you again. Stay well and always be you. Take care.
Bye.